Friendly reminder. This is a horror movie in Korea suitable for viewers aged 18 and above. It is said that 80% of viewers recall their childhood homeroom teacher after watching it. They all remember their homeroom teacher from childhood. The film is based on a true event related to the Teacher's Appreciation Banquet. The horror level is off the charts. Hurry and watch it with your gullible friends. 100. The story begins. A young female teacher is taking a group of students on a spring outing by the seaside. Suddenly, a stream of blood flows down her thigh into the water. The teacher then faints. It turns out that today is the day when Teacher Park, who is pregnant, is about to give birth. But unexpectedly, the child born is a monstrosity. The husband cannot accept this fact. He even wants to kill the son by throwing him to the ground. Fortunately, Teacher Park desperately pleads. Only then does the man finally give up. However, a few years later, he still cannot accept that his son is a monstrosity. He forces himself and the child into the basement. Although at Teacher Park's pleas, her husband decided to spare their son's life, but he himself resolutely hanged himself. From that day on, Teacher Park's deformed son lived in the basement, until many years later, 2 police officers suddenly visited. But just as they turned on the basement light, what came into view were 5 bodies in a horrific state. However, Teacher Park's deformed son had long since disappeared. According to the police investigation, the only common point among the 5 victims was that they were all former students of Teacher Park. At this time, Teacher Park had also fallen into a coma from shock. Clearly, she was very likely to know the truth behind the case. But Detective Kim waited by her bedside for a long time, without seeing any signs of Teacher Park waking up. Left with no choice, Detective Kim had to leave. At that moment, the girl beside him called out to him. She candidly stated that she not only understood the details of the case, but also knew the identity of the murderer. The girl's name was Mize. She was a classmate of the deceased. A year ago, she found herself in a desperate situation after losing her job. After Teacher Park, who had long been paralyzed, learned of this, she hired her to take care of herself. Under Mize's attentive care, Teacher Park gradually emerged from the shadow of her paralysis. She smiled more and more. Mize felt that she alone could help improve the teacher's condition. Why not call all the students from the class together? Hold a teacher's appreciation banquet. Perhaps that would be more beneficial for the teacher's recovery. On the day of the gathering, the first to arrive was a handsome boy named Kim Myung-ho. As soon as Teacher Park saw him, she couldn't help but show a kind smile. Look how much you've grown. Come a bit closer, let me see you better. When Teacher Park gently held his palm, Kim Myung-ho, however, revealed a hint of unusual emotion. He seemed somewhat resistant to the teacher being close to him, quickly withdrew their hand. Then they exchanged a few simple words and left the room. Shortly after, another couple drove in. These two were not just a married couple, still the former class president and vice class president. Teacher Park learned that the two had tied the knot. Couldn't help but exclaim. She already knew that the two were a perfect match. Unexpectedly, Seo suddenly smiled with a sarcastic tone and reminded the teacher, "You didn't say that back in the day, do I? The class president and vice class president you hate the most. We both come from poor families. You sighed and said that we are a perfect match for being poor. Such an exciting plot. I have to share Fragrant Pig with my girlfriend. Are you still watching movies alone in solitude? Why not try Deep? It accurately locates local single beauties as soon as you log in. Easily meet new friends nearby. Enough talk, I'm off to find some cute girls." It turns out Teacher Park is not as kind-hearted as she appears. On the contrary, she is extremely snobbish. Seo still clearly remembers to this day. On a certain Teacher's Day, Teacher Park joyfully opened his gift box. Upon discovering that it only contained a few pairs of socks, her expression immediately darkened. She even publicly ordered Seo to take this junk back. But when she saw the valuable silk scarves from other students, Teacher Park showed a satisfied smile again. She even put the scarf around her neck on the spot. To this day, Seo has not forgotten the humiliation from his teacher. Therefore, he just exchanged a few pleasantries with her. Then he left the room with his wife. Then, 2 more students rushed over. As soon as they met, they performed a bowing ceremony to Teacher Park. Seeing the students so respectful, Teacher Park felt very pleased. But immediately, she noticed that Dabong seemed to have some difficulty walking. This surprised her very much. After all, this guy named Dabong was the star athlete of the class back then. Hearing the teacher's inquiry, Dabong awkwardly scratched his head and said that he had been punished by her to squat all day for making a mistake. Since then, he developed a condition that prevented him from participating in sports. Upon hearing this, Teacher Park showed a bewildered expression. It was clear that she had never really cared about this small matter. Sunhee, standing nearby, noticed Teacher Park's embarrassment and suggested taking her out for a walk. Teacher Park gladly agreed, but she also did not expect. I had also heard Sunhee in the past. It turns out that the glamorous Sunhee now was a chubby kid in her childhood. She was often the target of Teacher Park's ridicule. She was laughed at by the whole class for being fat and ugly. The deeply hurt Sunhee vowed to undergo plastic surgery and lose weight since then. Now she has spent all her money on cosmetic surgery. The more Sunhee thought about it, the angrier she became. She suddenly pushed her wheelchair to the edge of the cliff and then stopped. She nearly scared Teacher Park half to death. Although the students who came this time had all been humiliated by Teacher Park, they still couldn't understand why that classmate named Jung Won would come too. Back then, out of curiosity about the teacher's monstrous son, they secretly came to the basement window to see what he actually looked like. found out that the boy always wore a rabbit mask. At that moment, one of them suddenly reached out and removed the boy's mask. That incredibly ugly face. Instantly, it scared a few people who ran away in fright. But only Jung-won did not leave. He kindly returned the mask. Since the deformed child grew up, it was the first time he received kindness from his peers. But regrettably, Teacher Park suddenly rushed over and gave Jung-won a harsh lesson. She even scolded him for not respecting her son. Since this incident occurred, consequently, Jung-won became a thorn in Teacher Park's side. One time, Jung-won accidentally soiled his pants in class. This gave Teacher Park the chance to take revenge. She unexpectedly imposed an expulsion on him on the spot. Jung-won's mother sought justice for her son. He decided to confront Teacher Park personally. Unexpectedly, he was hit by a car and died on the way. From that day on, the already reticent Jung-won became even more reclusive. By the evening, everyone tacitly agreed not to bring up the past anymore, even showing concern for Teacher Park's health, hoping for her speedy recovery. But Seo could no longer tolerate everyone's hypocrisy. He stood up on the spot and gave Teacher Park a thorough scolding. He angrily criticized her for always unjustly accusing her students, hurting everyone's self-esteem, and not deserving to be a teacher at all. Do you think we came here because we missed you? I came to see this bitch, and how she is just barely clinging to life. Dabong intended to stop Seo from saying more, but because of his leg injury, he was easily pushed to the ground by Seo. After the angry Seo left the gathering alone, Teacher Park finally cried out in anguish, saying that she did all of that back then for everyone's good. Once those words were spoken, the remaining few instantly understood. They would never receive an apology from Teacher Park in their lifetime. After Seo vented his anger at Teacher Park, he was alone, strolling by the seaside to relax. Suddenly, he noticed not far away a shadow approaching him. Seo thought it was another old classmate coming to calm him down, so he urged the person to leave quickly. Instead, he saw that the person was using tape to bind Seo to the chair. He also forcefully pried open Seo's mouth with a compass. Then he snapped the carving knife into pieces. He dumped all the shattered knife pieces into Seo's mouth. While Seo was being tormented, his wife, Yoon-young, was bathing Teacher Park. Yoon-young hoped the teacher wouldn't blame her husband, because she had experienced similar encounters herself. It turned out that on that teacher's day, not only Seo had been humiliated, there's Yoon-young, who can't even afford to give a pair of socks. Due to extreme poverty at home, she could only handwrite a greeting card as a gift, but it ended up being taken out by Teacher Park for public humiliation, compared to cash. That must be just garbage to you. It should just be trash, right? Yoon-young's words left Teacher Park speechless. It seemed that she sensed the atmosphere was a bit awkward. Yoon-young then walked aside to wash the towels. Unexpectedly, the paralyzed Teacher Park suddenly slid into the bathtub. She desperately shouted for help, but Yoon-young remained indifferent. It was Mize who heard the cries for help. She rushed over just in time to rescue the teacher. Shortly after, Yoon-young, who was kicked out of the bathroom by Mize, was about to return to her room to rest. But then she suddenly noticed that the blanket was slightly bulging. Yoon-young thought it was her husband playing a prank on her, so she immediately lifted the blanket. She found that there was only a pillow and a rabbit mask inside. Just as Yoon-young was feeling puzzled, not noticing at all, a hand suddenly reached out from under the bed. When Yoon-young opened her eyes again, actually found himself tied up, and her husband, who had been tortured into a grotesque form, right in front of her at that moment. Immediately after, the masked man used the stapler in his hand. He forcibly nailed her eyelids to her eye sockets. This way, she could see her husband all the time. By the time it was deep night, Dabong's old injury on his right leg flared up, causing unbearable pain. He can only rely on alcohol to numb himself. But alcohol gives courage to the cowardly. In the end, he couldn't hold back and sought revenge against Teacher Park. It turns out that the reason Dabong was punished squat for an entire day back then was, it's just because he didn't achieve a good ranking in the competition, and Teacher Park's punishment for him. But it ruined his career. The angrier Dabong became, the more he was ready to take revenge on Teacher Park. He suddenly saw a shadow flash outside the window. The other party was indeed that mysterious masked man. The drunken Dabong saw this. He was so scared that he turned and ran away. But he was a cripple. How could he run faster than a fully able-bodied person? He was quickly knocked unconscious from behind by the masked man. He was also dragged into the basement. When he woke up, as a result, he was violently beaten by the masked man. At that moment, Mize was sleeping. Finally, he heard sounds coming from the basement. He prepared to investigate with his hands. Instead, they saw 3 bloody corpses. Soon after, Kim Myung-ho and Soon-hee rushed over upon hearing the noise. Looking at the scene before him, Kim Myung-ho speculated, the killer must be the teacher's deformed son. But just as he was about to find out the whereabouts of the other party, unexpectedly, Soon-hee suddenly locked both of them in the basement. However, Soon-hee was not an accomplice of the masked man, but wanted to take this opportunity to kill the teacher who caused her a lifetime of misery. Soon-hee pushed Teacher Park into a wheelchair. In the end, it was Soon-hee who accidentally fell and died on the spot, preparing to create an accident to push Teacher Park down. But unexpectedly, Mize suddenly appeared. Both sides engaged in a fight without any surprises. Again, brought her to the edge of the cliff. After narrowly escaping death, Mize brought the teacher back to the room. He was unexpectedly knocked unconscious by Kim Myung-ho with a shovel. It turned out that Kim Myung-ho noticed the masked man was reluctant to show up. So, he decided to use Teacher Park to threaten the murderer. But unexpectedly, the masked man suddenly appeared and attacked Kim Myung-ho from behind. After a fierce struggle, Kim Myung-ho was firmly pinned down by the masked man, choking him. In a critical moment, he grabbed the compass from the ground. He fiercely stabbed it towards the man's neck. However, the masked man seemed to feel no pain. He actually crushed Kim Myung-ho's eyes with his thumb, killing him on the spot. At that moment, even Teacher Park believed the murderer was her own son. But when the man took off the rabbit mask, it turned out to be Jungwon's face. Jungwon initially intended to kill Teacher Park to avenge his mother, but then he thought differently. Letting Teacher Park live in guilt is the greatest punishment for her. Detective Kim, after understanding the case, immediately dispatched officers to capture Jungwon. But when they arrived at Jungwon's home, they found that in the room, aside from a mummified body, there was no sign of anyone else. But then Detective Kim discovered again. The room was filled with young girls' clothes everywhere. This made him doubt whether this was really Jungwon's home. But the rabbit patterns on the wall proved that this house was indeed related to the murderer. After seeing this, Detective Kim had a bold guess. And soon, his guess was confirmed. He suddenly received a call from a colleague, learning that among Teacher Park's students, there was actually no one named Mize. And according to the autopsy report, the 5 deceased actually died from poisoning. Detective Kim concluded that the girl named Mize was actually the real Jungwon. But discovering the truth now was already too late, because Jungwon had already brought the awakened Teacher Park to the seaside. What she told Detective Kim was actually all her own personal experiences. Since her mother passed away, Jungwon is constantly thinking about revenge, until she heard that Teacher Park's deformed son had passed away. Not only did she become lonely and destitute, but she also became paralyzed. Only those 5 students she was proud of were left in the world. They came to visit her every year. Therefore, Jungwon decided to make her experience the pain she once endured. So she secretly lurked around her early on, and on the day of the banquet, she poisoned the food, to let Teacher Park see with her own eyes her most cherished students dying tragically one by one. Watching the heartbroken Teacher Park, Jungwon finally experienced the feeling of revenge fulfilled. She then jumped into the sea without hesitation. Before long, there was only an empty wheelchair left at the dock. Obviously, Teacher Park also couldn't bear the torment within. Similarly chose to jump into the sea to end their life. Alright, that's it for today's story. Subscribe to the channel to continue watching. See you next time.